Our top story this hour, the U.S. Secretary of State Pompeo met negotiators from the Afghan government and the Taliban in Doha. The meet shows the progress in talks between the groups as Washington speeds up its withdrawal from the region. Pompeo called on the Afghan government and Taliban negotiation teams to separately meet him in a luxury hotel. Pompeo was expected to press for reduction of violence in his meetings with both Taliban and Afghan government. The meeting comes at a time when Kabul was targeted with rockets in a recent attack which has claimed at least 10 lives. The Islamic State took responsibility for the attack. Taliban has distanced itself from the incident. Meanwhile, Chief Afghan negotiator Abdullah has said that both sides are now very close to breaking the deadlock in peace talks. The talks that began in Doha on September 12th had issues over several agenda disagreements. The Taliban had agreed to give up violence in exchange of U.S. troop withdrawal.
The point is that we are still in the procedural phase. It's not like we haven't moved towards discussion of the main substance of negotiations, the main agenda. We are close. We are very close, and hopefully we pass this phase and get to the substantial issues, which security will be the main issue.
Meanwhile, speculations are rife on the future of Afghan talks under the administration of Joe Biden, who will take over as the U.S. president next year. Both Trump and Biden back U.S. troop withdrawal from Afghanistan. However, Biden has not set a deadline for the pullout. Biden is also likely to hold the Taliban accountable for violence. According to the Afghanistan government, the Taliban has killed over 1,200 civilians in 53 suicide attacks and nearly 1,300 explosions in the last 6 months.
Clear.
And joining us live from London is author and journalist and Afghanistan expert Lynn O'Donnell. Thank you so much for joining us. My first question to you is, U.S. Secretary of State Pompeo met with the Afghan government and Taliban negotiators. This as the U.S. speeds up withdrawal from the region. What can you tell us about this and the main points of discussion for this meet?
The American side haven't released any details of their discussions with either side, the Afghan Republic or the Taliban. I can imagine that what Pompeo is doing is trying to speed up the process that brings the two sides together to start talking about substance. They haven't talked really about substance since they began on September the 12th. The Afghans have been calling on the Taliban to initiate a ceasefire. The Taliban are refusing. And I think what they're doing is using the levels of violence that you mentioned and that we've seen over the past 6 months, but certainly escalate in the past 2 months, is trying to convince the Afghan Republic side, the government side, that they have the power, they have the firepower to cower the Republic side into doing what they want to do. And they have no reason to believe that that's not the case. I doubt very much that Pompeo went and called for a ceasefire. That's not what the international community is generally doing. They don't even mention the Taliban's name. All they do is accept that this was an Islamic State or an attack on a hospital where women in labour and babies were murdered by suicide bombers and insurgent gunmen was by Islamic State. It's all one and the same, and it's all playing into the Taliban's hands.
All right. Now, as we know, despite the ongoing peace talks, violence has continued to soar in Afghanistan. And like you mentioned, just recently, Kabul was targeted also. How do you assess this?
Well, I think that this is classic insurgent tactics, and we've seen it over and over again in the past decade especially. This is the way it works. You want us to come to the table and talk peace, then we will ratchet up the violence. We'll put much more pressure on your security forces and your allies' security forces to show that we have the upper hand here. And I think that's what's going on. The Taliban leadership have shown twice this year that they are able to turn the violence on and off at will. There have been 2 brief ceasefires which have actually worked. And one of them came before the signing of the February deal with the United States in Doha. They can turn it off and they can turn it on, and yet they are refusing calls from the Afghan government and the Afghan people for a ceasefire. They're turning up the violence, making it worse and worse. I mean, I don't know how much worse it can get, basically to show that they are the stronger party in these talks.
All right. And also going forward, how do you see this issue getting resolved? What can we expect in the days to come?
In the days to come, I think days is probably too short a time frame to be looking at this. I think that what's been happening is a wait-and-see stalling process from both sides while the US election process played out. President Trump has entrenched his position in wanting to withdraw from a lot of countries where the Americans are engaged in conflict, and Afghanistan is no different. Whether or not a Biden administration, which still won't be installed for 2 months, will reverse or tone down slow down the withdrawal process remains to be seen. It looks like he's going to install a defence secretary in Michelle Fleury, who is a bit more of a humanitarian and willing to look at the conditions on the ground than Trump's people have been. So I think that we have to look at it in terms of months, and then once there is an actual peace process going on, in terms of years. These things never happen overnight. There's a long way to go.
All right, Lynn, thank you so much for joining us with all those details and your insight in this. Thank you.